Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. In the 1950s, London's fog was so dense and toxic it caused accidents, paralyzed the city, and killed thousands. The Great Smog of 1952 ended domestic coal use, exposing the invisible cost of pollution. In November 1946, amid the ruins of Warsaw, a photographer created a hand-painted backdrop to hide the war debris. The art became a refuge and hope, a background to keep living. On July 18, 1937, nearly 1,000 men marched in New Jersey wearing Nazi armbands, a shocking parade that revealed Hitler's regime influence on American soil. George Junius Stinney Jr. was the youngest American executed in 1944 at age 14. His shocking story raises questions about justice and prejudice in the legal system of the time. In 1916, British soldiers played football wearing gas masks in France, a moment of respite and humanity amid the horror of the trenches of World War I. In 1905, a giant enjoys a beer in a tavern, impressing everyone around. Curiously, giants like him were popular attractions at fairs and circuses of the time. In 1945, American troops prepare Nazi General Anton Dostler for execution, punished for the death of 15 OSS agents in Italy, justice served after war crimes. During Al Capone's trial in 1931, several mobsters hid their faces with hats to avoid being identified by the press. It was the fear of fame or of reprisals from the mafia itself. In 2004, Viktor Yushchenko was poisoned with dioxin during his campaign for the presidency of Ukraine. He survived, but his face was permanently disfigured. Even so, he won the elections and led the Orange Revolution. Before smartphones and selfie sticks, this man created his own solution in 1957. He used a piece of wood to trigger the camera and capture his self-portrait. Analog creativity at its best. This is the sharpest image ever made of Venus. Shrouded in clouds of sulfuric acid and temperatures up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, the planet reveals its turbulent atmosphere in golden tones. Beautiful from afar, but more hostile than any desert on Earth. Easter of 1945. African-American soldiers William E. Thomas and Joseph Jackson pose smiling with bombs nicknamed Easter eggs for Hitler. In 1960, at 6 years old, Ruby Bridges faced insults and threats to attend a white school alone. Escorted by federal agents, she became an icon of the civil rights struggle, with a lunchbox in hand and courage in her eyes. 1954, Ella Fitzgerald sings at the Tiffany Club with Marilyn Monroe in the audience. Marilyn helped Ella break into major stages, using her fame to break racial barriers. In 1909, the RMS Mauritania sailed the oceans as one of the fastest and most luxurious transatlantic liners of the time. It held the speed record for 22 years, impressing passengers and competitors alike. Rosa Shanina was a Soviet sniper in World War II, with 59 confirmed kills. Her precision and courage inspired many, pushing the limits of war. In the 1890s, Annie Oakley posed with her rifle for True West magazine. A legend of the Wild West, she captivated crowds with her aim and broke barriers in a male-dominated world. Siamese twins who faced a 1 in 30 million chance of surviving birth defied all odds. Now adults and graduates, they work together as teachers, inspiring hundreds of students every year. The Ovitz family, Jewish artists and musicians, survived the horror of Auschwitz during World War II. Among them, 7 were dwarfs, showing impressive strength and unity against the impossible. Hamburg, 1933. Books burn as the Nazi regime attempts to erase ideas. The fire on Kaiser Friedrich Ufer marked the beginning of an era in which free thought became the enemy of the state. At just 21 years old, Sophie Scholl defied the Nazi regime by distributing anti-war pamphlets alongside her brother. She was convicted of treason and executed, one of the greatest symbols of resistance in Nazi Germany. In 1936, Jesse Owens won the long jump at the Berlin Olympics, publicly defying Nazi ideology in front of Hitler. His greatest rival, Lutz Long, applauded him and later died in the war. A man tries to sell his car for just $100, holding a sign that reads, "I lost everything in the stock market." The image was taken on October 29, 1929, the tragic Black Tuesday, marking the crash of the New York Stock Exchange. At 21, Winston Churchill posed in 1895 as a cavalry bugler. Before becoming Prime Minister and an icon of resistance in the United Kingdom, he was a prisoner of war, correspondent, and tireless adventurer. In this image, Jews are forced to dig their own graves. After the mass executions, Nazi soldiers celebrated with parties and alcohol, a cruel and inhuman face of the Holocaust. In 1913, this unusual scene gathered three European human extremes. Cornelius Bruns, the tallest, alongside the shortest and the heaviest, nicknamed Cannon Colossus, during a calm card game accompanied by beer. In September 1940, veteran Popeye, with 21 years of service, posed aboard HMS Rodney. The ship, famous for helping sink the Bismarck, housed this legendary sailor with arms as strong as his nickname suggested. Germany, 1945. A 15-year-old boy cries as he is captured by American forces. A member of the Luftwaffe, he represents the final despair of a regime that sent even children into war. In 1940, Benito Mussolini inspects Italian troops surrounded by rows of cannons. The image shows fascist Italy in full display of strength, just before plunging into the chaos of World War II. American soldiers advanced through the icy waters of Normandy on June 6, 1944. The image, known as Into the Jaws of Death, immortalized the moment when thousands risked everything on D-Day. Photo taken during the Fifth Solvay Conference in 1927, gathering the greatest minds of quantum physics. Among them were Einstein, Curie, and Bohr. Of the 29 present, 17 received the Nobel Prize. In 1967, this photo immortalized the moment an electrician saved his colleague with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation atop a pole. The kiss of life became a worldwide symbol of courage and a pure reflection of human instinct to protect. In 1935, young shoe shiners surrounded a Civil War veteran on a Pennsylvania corner. While cleaning boots to survive, they listened to stories from a time when the country was still fighting for its own soul. In April 1945, British soldiers liberated Bergen-Belsen, finding thousands of bodies and survivors near death. The smell was so unbearable that even the liberators went days without eating. Robert McGee survived scalping at 13 years old in 1864 at the hands of Sioux Chief Little Turtle. In the 1890s, his scars told a story of resistance and courage against the impossible. In 1944, United States Army military police improvised and toasted bread over molten lava from Mount Vesuvius. Creativity and humor, even amid the chaos of war. Harriet Tubman, portrayed in 1868, was an American heroine who guided slaves to freedom and worked as a spy during the Civil War. Courage that changed history's course. In 1881, the Statue of Liberty began to take shape in Paris, ready to become a worldwide symbol of freedom and hope as it crossed the Atlantic to the United States. Janina Nowak was deported to Auschwitz in 1942, where she faced the horror of the Nazi camp. Her story is a silent testament to human resistance in the face of extreme cruelty. On July 12, 1943, wounded Americans awaited evacuation on stretchers aboard a ship near Munda Point, Solomon Islands. The harsh reality of the Pacific in World War II. Simone Seguin, or Nicole Minet, was only 18 when she began sabotaging trains and capturing Nazis in the French resistance. She wore stolen uniforms and used a bicycle as a stealth weapon, becoming a living legend after the war. In 2003, a New York police officer encountered Ming, a 355-pound tiger living hidden in an apartment in Harlem. The owner fed it whole chickens and slept beside it. Darts and rappelling were needed to remove it. In 1919, the Harlem Hellfighters returned as heroes, an African-American unit that fought longer on the front line than any other U.S. unit in World War I, but faced racism at home despite being covered in medals. In 1968, during the Tet Offensive in Hue, this American Marine was photographed in deep shock. Empty gaze, trembling hands, the psychological impact of the Vietnam War, once called merely combat fatigue. Tilapia skin is being used to treat burns and diabetic wounds. Rich in collagen, it accelerates healing and becomes living tissue. The technique started in Brazil and is revolutionizing regenerative medicine. March 1910. Stalin, then 31 years old, is photographed in Bylov prison, Azerbaijan. Imprisoned for revolutionary activities, he was still only a Georgian agitator, years before becoming the ruthless leader of the Soviet Union. In the New York subway in 1985, an undercover police officer detains a robber with precision and coolness. The frozen tension in this Bruce Davidson photo reveals the chaos and courage beneath the city. During World War II, German soldiers were given Pervitin, a methamphetamine, to increase endurance and focus. Chemical warfare went beyond weapons. It also ran through their veins. In 1903, Benito Mussolini was arrested in Switzerland for inciting strikes. Young and rebellious, he was expelled from the country days later. Years later, he would become the fascist dictator who led Italy into war. This German soldier from World War I holds a serrated bayonet, such a brutal weapon that if captured, many preferred to break it to avoid summary executions for violating the ethics of war. On August 25, 1944, American soldiers watched the French flag return atop the Eiffel Tower. It marked the end of Nazi occupation in Paris, and the symbol of freedom once again fluttered in the heart of the City of Light. On November 22, 1963, aboard Air Force One, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president beside Jackie Kennedy, still wearing JFK's blood-stained dress. It was the fastest and darkest inauguration in American history. At the premiere of City Lights in 1931, Charlie Chaplin brought none other than Albert Einstein as a guest. The genius remarked, "They applaud you because everyone understands you. Me, because no one understands me." At a gathering of power and blood in 1894, Queen Victoria and her family, which included kings and czars, celebrated a wedding in Coburg. Curiously, many of these leaders would become rivals in World War I. In 1977, the cast of Star Wars out of their iconic costumes, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, and others show that behind the galactic heroes were ordinary people about to change cinema forever. During the Battle of Tinian, an American Marine offers candy to a Japanese boy through barbed wire, a human gesture amid the chaos of war. In October 1942, on the Kokoda Trail, a Japanese prisoner is cared for by Australian soldiers. A rare moment of humanity amid the brutality of jungle warfare in New Guinea. In 1974, a young Robin Williams walked through Central Park, still unknown. Little did he know his talent would transform humor and cinema forever. In 1918, Charlie Chaplin used his humor to sell war bonds on Wall Street, helping finance the Allied effort and showing that comedy can also be an act of patriotism. In the 1920s, the Great Pyramid stood out under the sunset, illuminating centuries of mysteries and stories from ancient Egypt that still fascinate the entire world. Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of the 26th U.S. President, was the only general to land in the first wave on D-Day. In 1944, in Italy, he showed inherited courage leading the attack. A Finnish soldier watches the burning city, probably Porajärvi, in Karelia during 1944, an image revealing the cruel impacts of war in the heart of Europe. In 1912, Marie Curie worked in her laboratory in Paris. The first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and the only one to win in two different fields, she handled radioactive materials unaware of the fatal health risks. In 1970, Elvis made a surprise visit to the White House and asked to become a drug agent. Nixon welcomed him, handed over a badge, and posed for the most requested photo in the National Archives, the King and the President side by side. This mirror self-portrait was made about 100 years ago in Japan, using a tripod camera with impressive precision. Long before digital selfies, this couple immortalized intimacy and technique in a single analog shot. A French boy approaches newly arrived Indian soldiers fighting in World War I. The scene, recorded in Marseille in 1914, reveals a rare moment of tenderness amid the start of a devastating conflict. Before Alan Turing, it was Polish codebreakers who paved the way to break the Nazis' Enigma machine. Their achievements were essential, but remain forgotten by history for decades. Roosevelt and Churchill, side by side at the Casablanca Conference in 1943. There, the Allies decided they would only accept the unconditional surrender of the Axis, a decisive moment of World War II. September 7, 1940. The first German air raid in the Blitz leaves London covered in smoke. The Tower of London and Tower Bridge silently witnessed the beginning of one of the city's darkest nights. 4 months after the atomic bomb, a mother and her son pose among ruins and burned trees in Hiroshima. December 1945. The pain persists, but the child's eyes still carry hope. June 1944. Soldiers of the Red Army advance under darkness on the Baltic front line. With weapons in hand and alert eyes, each night step was a risk between shadows and silence. On August 3, 1909, children watched in awe as Louis Blériot's airplane flew over the sands of Calais. A simple moment that captured the birth of the aviation era. On December 25, 1937, goalkeeper Sam Bartram stood alone on the field for 15 minutes, unaware that the match had been canceled due to heavy fog. A scene that became legendary in the world of soccer. During the Russo-Turkish War of 1878, Tarik Cossacks paused under the open sky. With rifles on their laps and vigilant eyes, they represented a warrior tradition forged in the steppes and in blood. In 1945, the future Queen Elizabeth II, then 18 years old, drove ambulances and maintained engines. She was the only British monarch trained as a mechanic, breaking protocol during World War II. After years hidden in French castles to escape the Nazis, the Mona Lisa was carefully unwrapped in 1945. The world's most famous artwork survived the war intact, protected as a national treasure. In 1942, Eunice Hancock, only 21 years old, operated a pneumatic sander in an airplane factory. While men went to war, thousands of women like her kept the United States war industry running. In 1908, Tolstoy was already a living legend. Author of War and Peace, he lived simply, wearing peasant clothes he sewed himself. He refused the Nobel Prize and donated the rights to his works, believing art should serve the people. In 1946, a former prisoner of war returned to Vienna limping, with a wooden leg attached to his backpack. The city tried to rebuild, just like him. The photo captures the invisible weight many carried after the war's end. On the King's Speech. In September 1939, George VI posed for a photo while addressing the nation after declaring war on Germany. It was his debut as a firm voice in dark times. 1945. An American soldier watches piles of treasures looted by the Nazis, hidden in Schlosskirche, Bavaria. Among the crates, gold, art, and secrets of a fallen empire. 1916. Nikola Tesla in his office on West 40th Street, New York. Surrounded by papers and inventions, their ideas were born that would shape the future of electricity, many decades ahead of their time. 4 female pilots disembark from the Pistol Pack in Mama in Lockbourne, 1944. Members of the Women Air Force Service pilots, they flew powerful B-17s, breaking barriers and soaring high in World War II. Orville Wright glides with his glider over the dunes of North Carolina in 1902, testing the first steps that would lead to powered flight and forever change aviation history. Union soldiers pose proudly beside a cannon in 1862 during the American Civil War, a symbol of power and struggle that shaped the destiny of the United States. In 1969, the Black Panther Party protested in Olympia against a gun control law, a movement that united the fight for civil rights and debates about power and safety in America. Rasputin, the enigmatic Russian mystic, gained power in the Tsarist court with his visions and charisma. It is said he survived several assassination attempts before his mysterious end. There are cities, metropolises, and then there is Tokyo, a universe of its own, full of lights, order, and movement where the future seems routine. In the Vietnam War, 58,148 Americans died. Among survivors, 75,000 suffered some type of disability, with 23,214 completely disabled. More than 5,000 lost limbs, and 1,081 suffered multiple amputations. Most of the dead were under 21, 11,465 were under 20, and 17,539 were married when they departed. Dustin Gorton, a Columbine High School student, breaks down after discovering the shooters were his own friends. The image captured in 1999 became one of the most impactful of the tragedy that forever changed the debate about school violence. Abraham Lincoln in Sharpsburg, 1862, alongside spy Allan Pinkerton and General McClernand. Pinkerton, on the left, created the famous detective agency and prevented a possible assassination of the president years earlier by disguising himself in his protection. During the Oka crisis in 1990, a Mohawk warrior confronted Canadian troops. The conflict began with the attempt to turn indigenous sacred lands into a golf course. In the end, the government took the land by force. In 1998, a crowd gathered in Times Square to watch the final episode of Seinfeld. It was a rare moment when New York stopped to watch television in the street, proof of the cultural impact of the series. Cudjoe Lewis, the last survivor of a slave ship, gave his interview in the 1930s. Abducted from Africa, he lived through the horror of slavery and survived to tell his voice echoes through history. Beneath the streets of Rome, archaeologists found the head of Dionysus, god of wine, sculpted 2,000 years ago. Even after centuries buried, the gaze of the deity still appears alive among the ruins. After the end of the siege of Leningrad in 1945, posters like this one urged the people to rebuild. Amid ruins and scars, hope emerged to raise again the city that symbolized Soviet resistance. In 1899, this woman demonstrated one of the first vacuum cleaners. Long before modern convenience, the domestic revolution was already taking shape, with elegance and innovation. In 1905, Albert Einstein revolutionized science with the theory of special relativity. In this image, we see the young genius in the year he forever changed the way we understand time and space. At age 27, in 1916, Charlie Chaplin was already a silent film star. His youthful look in this rare photo contrasts with the global icon he would become, making the world laugh without uttering a word. In 1917, Mata Hari was executed at age 41 for espionage. At her final moment, she refused to blindfold and blew a kiss to the firing squad, a gesture that sealed her legend as the most enigmatic spy in history. Michel and Edmund Navratil were 4 and 2 years old when they survived the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. They were the only miners on board saved without any guardians. Their father, who boarded them under false names, did not survive. In 1939, unemployed and without prospects, Thomas Cave tattooed his own Social Security number on his arm, his only form of identity. He went to pick beans with his wife in Oregon, a raw representation of the American Great Depression. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white person in Montgomery. Her act sparked a bus boycott led by Martin Luther King Jr. and ignited the civil rights movement in the United States. In 1945, Easy Company paratroopers arrived at the Berghof, Hitler's residence in the Alps. After years of combat, they stepped into the heart of the Reich and toasted with wines from the dictator's personal cellar. April 1945, a soldier from the 1st U.S. Division walks among the rubble of the monument to the Battle of Nations in Leipzig, the historic Colossus, now the scene of the Nazi downfall. Gene Jansen, bodybuilder, and his wife Pat show true family power with their son Kent, only 11 months old. A trio proving strength goes far beyond muscles. On November 7, 1918, Wall Street exploded in celebration at the end of World War I when Germany surrendered. A moment of relief and hope after years of devastating conflict. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie leave Sarajevo City Hall in 1914, moments before the assassination that triggered World War I. A tragedy that changed history's course in just 1 month. Gavrilo Princip, arrested in 1914, is known as the man whose act triggered World War I, a shot that changed the fate of nations and marked the 20th century forever. In 1959, Fidel Castro visited the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of freedom in the United States, shortly before becoming one of the most controversial figures of the Cold War and Cuban history. In 1936, a rural mother and 3 children lived near the Tennessee River, facing the harsh reality of the Great Depression. Stories of struggle and hope in the heart of America. In 1865, Charleston lay in ruins after years of civil war. The city, where the first shot of the conflict was fired, turned to rubble, its streets telling the story of a divided nation on the brink of reconstruction. On September 7, 1967, a South Vietnamese ranger prepared his machine gun before entering the Mekong Delta swamp, a region where the jungle swallowed men and war was fought inch by inch amid mud, ambushes, and silence. This is Steamboat, the legendary rodeo horse that inspired the official logo of Wyoming. His fame began in the 1900s when he became known for never being fully tamed, not even by champion cowboys. In Egypt, archaeologists discovered a 4,000-year-old funerary garden, the first ever found. Built near a tomb, it may have represented the renewal of life after death in ancient Egypt, before and after a liver transplant. The smile is the same, but now it carries hope and renewed life. The scar on the chest marks a father's victory for more time with his daughter. In August 1944, young Poles rose up against Nazi occupation. For 63 days, they fought for Warsaw with courage and unity. This photo immortalizes the hope of a generation that refused to surrender. In 1910, the iconic Hong Kong Hotel stood facing the harbor, with traditional boats sailing before it. A meeting of the colonial and the ancestral beneath the mountains of the ever-changing city. At the summer house in Cape Cod, John F. Kennedy appears relaxed beside his fiancée, Jacqueline Bouvier. It was July 4, 1953, and he did not yet know he would become the 35th President of the United States. In 1956, Henry Behrens, the smallest man in the world, was photographed dancing with his cat at his doorstep in Worthing, England. The image conveys tenderness and breaks stereotypes with simplicity. In 1941, during the traditional Crow Fair in Montana, elders of the Crow tribe watched the rodeo with elegance and pride. Their attire, gazes, and posture reveal the strength of a culture that endures through time. In 1936, Salvador Dali arrived in the United States aboard the SS Normandy. In his luggage, a gala mannequin and a dissected bull, part of his first surrealist exhibition in New York. And he did not yet have his famous mustache. Surrounded by the chains of the largest ship ever built at the time, Isambard Kingdom Brunel posed in 1857 in front of his creation, the SS Great Eastern. A visionary engineer, he designed tunnels, bridges, and railways that shaped modern United Kingdom. In 1918, a Senegalese soldier who lost both arms in the war relearns to write with prosthetics in Paris. He was part of a pioneering rehabilitation project that restored autonomy to amputees. Picasso holds a revolver and wears a hat given by American friends. Known for his bold art, he also loved eccentric objects and used the revolver to shoot blanks at curious visitors in his studio. West meets East. Two German brothers separated by the Berlin Wall reunited in 1963 thanks to a rare passage agreement. It was only 19 days that allowed hugs lost for years. A. Milne was born on this day in 1882. Alongside his son Christopher Robin and the Real Pooh in 1926, he created the bear that would enchant generations with stories of honey, friendship, and adventures in the 100-acre wood. Claude Monet, master of Impressionism, was born in Paris in 1840. His brushstrokes revolutionized art, capturing light and emotion like no one before. Did you know he painted the same scene several times to capture different hours of the day? Laura Bridgman was the first deaf-blind American child to learn English, 50 years before Helen Keller. In Boston, around 1845, she paved the way for the inclusive education we know today. In 1935, the giraffe women attracted attention when visiting St. James's Palace, London. Known for their elongated necks, they challenged traditions and captivated the public with their unique culture. An American Marine runs through enemy fire during the Battle of Okinawa on June 7, 1945, one of the fiercest fights in the Pacific that hastened the end of World War II. 3 Titanic survivors ready to testify before the United States Congress in 1912. Their stories revealed the mistakes behind the tragedy that shocked the world and forever changed navigation rules. View of New York in 1933. The Plaza buildings surrounding Central Park, capturing the grandeur of the city that never sleeps amid the Great Depression. Fun fact, the Plaza became a luxury icon in the Big Apple. Florence Owens Thompson, mother of 7 children, faced the Great Depression in 1936 in California. Her photo became a symbol of the struggle and resilience of migrant families in difficult times. Booker T. Washington was an African-American leader who transformed education and civil rights in the 19th century, advocating progress through work and knowledge amid difficult times. In 1945, the Buffalo Soldiers of the 92nd Division of the American Army rested in Italy. These African-American soldiers fought courageously, breaking racial barriers in a global war. Queen Victoria poses accompanied by her Indian servants Mustafa and Cheetah, both in uniform with medals, a reflection of the complex relations of the British Empire during the Victorian era. In 1922, the National Woman's Party marched in Washington, D.C., fighting for women's rights and inspiring generations to gain voice and vote in American politics. In 1964, Martin Luther King displayed photos of 3 civil rights activists murdered the previous summer in Mississippi, a landmark event that shocked the nation and intensified the fight against racism. 2 Moons, Cheyenne chief at the Battle of Little Bighorn, posed in 1910. He was part of a historic resistance that challenged the power of the United States Army in the fight for their lands and culture. A sniper from Company C, 5th Black Watch Battalion, positions himself in a destroyed building in Gennep, Netherlands in 1945. Silence and precision amid the destruction of war. In 1909, a young Kenyan woman posed with a dik-dik in Mombasa. This small antelope, almost the size of a cat, is famous for its agility and beauty in the heart of Africa. On June 25, 1924, Yankee Stadium opened its doors for Major League Baseball's inaugural game in the Bronx. The stadium would become a baseball temple and the stage for sports legends. In 1850, a daguerreotype captures tenderness between a nurse and a child, one of the first images showing dedication and care in 19th century medicine. In 1908, the Manhattan Bridge began to take shape as seen from Brooklyn. Today, it is an engineering icon that connects and transforms New York. Fun fact, Its construction took almost 8 years. After 27 days of intense battle, 2 snipers from the 317th Regiment paused in Gostorf to roll their own cigarettes, a moment of calm amid the chaos of war in 1945. Lawrence of Arabia in 1918 was the British man who united Arab tribes in the fight against the Ottoman Empire, writing an epic chapter of courage and strategy in the desert. In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. and Sammy Davis Jr. shared a laugh backstage at the Majestic Theater in New York, a meeting of cultural forces that inspired generations. In 1960, Otto Frank visited the attic of the secret annex on the day the Anne Frank house was open to the public, a place that immortalized courage and hope amid the darkness of war. In 1936, J. Edgar Hoover posed with a Thompson 45 submachine gun, reflecting the Prohibition era and the FBI's fight against organized crime in the United States. In 1921, Henry Ford posed next to the Model T, the car that revolutionized the industry and made automobiles accessible to millions, forever changing how people live and travel. During the Battle of Berlin, Soviet soldiers positioned a Maxim machine gun and aimed from windows and doors. The scene shows the final siege of the Third Reich, where every street became a trench and every building a battlefield. In 1942, Sugar Ray Robinson was already enchanting the world with his impeccable technique. Considered by many the greatest boxer of all time, he won his first 40 fights in a row, dancing in the ring like an artist. In 1968, a young Arnold Schwarzenegger, nicknamed the Austrian Oak, posed in London after winning Mr. Universe. At 21, he was already a legend in the making and barely spoke English when he arrived in England. In 1943, British SAS soldiers patrolled the North African desert in jeeps loaded with machine guns. Their lightning missions behind enemy lines redefined the concept of unconventional warfare. In 1907, Maud Wagner defied norms as the first tattoo artist in the United States. A former circus performer, she learned the art from her husband and covered her own body with freehand designs, never using an electric machine. Inside a packed C-17, desperate Afghans fled Kabul in August 2021. The aircraft took off with more than 800 people aboard, a record number, marking one of the most dramatic evacuations in recent history. Russian photographer Andrei Pavlov creates epic scenes with real ants and miniatures. In this image, an ant lifts a branch against the sunset. No digital montage, just patience, natural light, and millimetric creativity. In Turkey, this beach features adapted access that allows people in wheelchairs to enter the sea safely. A simple but powerful solution that guarantees the right to sea bathing for everyone. In 2018, the world said goodbye to Sudan, the last male northern white rhino. In this photo, his caretaker silently says, "Farewell." Only 2 females remain, and hope now depends on science to avoid total extinction. Before the massacre, Tiananmen Square was a sea of hope. Students danced and dreamed of freedom amid flags. Days later, tanks silenced that moment, but images like this still speak loudly. In 1901, photographed by British anthropologists, this Chinese man posed playfully, smiling with rice and chopsticks. He did not know photos were serious. He unintentionally became the happiest man in China.